The Psych Files, the show that is about what you are all about. It is about what psychology is really all about. And this is episode 177, part 2, my little series here on why some people just don't like psychology. And I'm going to try to defend psychology today. Let's see. Today I'm going to talk about a couple of issues. The feeling that psychology is not a science. The frustration over, first it's this and then it's this. How come we can't seem to just say, here's the reason. This is the reason why people are depressed, for example. Or this is why people are schizophrenic. I'd like to talk about what I think is a biggie, which is how psychologists are portrayed in the media. I've got a few movies and TV shows that I want to talk about. Okay, well, let's tackle this idea that psychology is a soft science. In fact, it was even said someone said on the Facebook group that the Psych Files Facebook group, by the way, facebook.com/groups/the Psych Files. Someone said, well, psychology is too soft. It's too soft of a science. I never heard that one. I've heard it referred to as a soft science. Okay, well, it's not physics. Lots of things do change, and it is difficult. I admit to that. And, one of the things that you have to get used to when you study psychology, of course, you have to study statistics, which is all about probabilities and things like that. The defense, I guess, I would give here, it is frustrating to see psychologists argue with each other. Or first you hear this and then you hear that. First thing I'd say, though, is that psychology is not alone in this aspect of it. In fact, when I wrote these down, in the past 2 weeks, I have seen a story that says that salt may not actually be that bad for you. So for how long have we been saying, well, you got to cut down on that salt? I'd have to get the article, and I'll put it on the website. I also heard that, you probably heard, especially if you're a man, that belly fat is really bad. Well, it turns out that not all forms of belly fat are bad for you. That's true. And how long did we hear that eggs were bad for you? And nowadays, eggs are considered okay, a good source of protein. So, I'll just say that the medical science is filled with these back and forth. Coffee, right? Oh, coffee's bad. No, coffee's good. Now I heard someone say, well, coffee is neither good nor bad. So we're not alone, and the body is complex, and the mind is really complex. There are, as a colleague of mine once said, behavior is multi-determined. In other words, what are you? I did a whole episode on why it's difficult to lose weight. Why is it difficult? Because the reason why people become overweight it's not just one. So we're a society that likes to have some answers. I like it too. Look, I want to know, is belly fat bad or good? I'm going to place my bets on the side that it's bad, and I don't know what part's not so good. I'm going to still probably cut down on my salt. So, I think there are some general guidelines, but it is hard to know why people have trouble losing weight. And each person is different, and this is the thing. A lot of self-help books want to reduce the reasons for people's problems to a specific thing. It's different for all of us. The reason why so much of us struggle is because we all have very different backgrounds, right? And some people have difficulty losing weight for purely physiological reasons. They have a low metabolism and genetics. Other people may have a high metabolism, but there are other sorts of, emotional issues that are wrapped up into it. And, we're also surrounded by food. And so you may have neither genetic issues nor in particular any or emotional problems, but we live in a world in which we're surrounded by food, and it's difficult to avoid, and you really have to, learn to avoid temptation. It's really rough. I want medical science to be, a harder science, and would love it if psychology was a little bit able to say definitively this or that. But that would be to deny the reality that what motivates us, what the reasons for our depression are different from one person to the next. So that's going to be a hard one to overcome. We all have to deal with the frustrations of the information flowing at us. What's good, what's bad, what causes this, what causes that. However, let me just say that said, that doesn't mean that it's like all of medicine should be thrown out the window because we're not sure if salt is good or bad. And we shouldn't throw psychology out the window by saying, well, then, in other words, you're saying you don't know anything. No, that's not true. There are many aspects of psychology which are pretty firm. And I'll just list a few of them. We do know, for example, that the more people that are around you when you are, let's say, attacked by someone, I'll go into bystander apathy. The more people that are around, the less likely you are to get help. That's been well established. It's been well established that in terms of your romantic partner, is it true that opposites attract? Or is it more true that birds of a feather flock together, that you're more similar? Well, plenty of evidence to suggest that while we tend to pay attention to the differences between ourselves and our romantic partner, the fact is we're far more similar than we are different. Lots of research on this, and this is great where psychology can come in and take these sort of homespun expressions like birds of a feather and provide support for them. A few other things that are pretty solid. The phases of the moon, right? We know that the phases of the moon don't cause people to act in strange ways. They don't cause an increase in instances of mental illness and reports in ERs and all that kind of thing. Let's change to a totally different area of psychology. Let's talk about applied behavior analysis. This is a technique developed out of behavioral theory. It is used with children with autism and reinforcing them very specifically according to a schedule, a specific way that you can deal with children with autism. Plenty of research behind this approach called applied behavioral analysis to suggest that it is very effective. Systematic desensitization in the treatment of phobias. Technique's been around for a long time. Plenty of great research to suggest that when we can teach you to relax and when we pair that with something that makes you anxious, we can reduce your anxiety. There's a very solid technique there. I've talked about mnemonics a million times in this podcast. Very established that your memory can be improved to the extent that you use imagery. Lots in cognitive psychology that tells us that learning is improved by spacing out your learning instead of cramming it in to the night before the test. I can go on. So there's plenty of great stuff in psychology, and it's frustrating that there isn't more of it. It's frustrating that there are so many schools of psychology. There's psychodynamic, there's behavioral, humanistic. Yeah, you can go to a therapist, and it can vary quite a lot from one therapist to the next. That's another maybe frustrating thing. If you've had a bad experience with a therapist, well, that can turn you off to psychology, and that would be unfortunate. And again, like medical science, though, I would say, why do you get second opinions when you go to a doctor? Not every doctor is going to give you the exact same diagnosis. In psychology, you may go to one therapist who's very directive, wants to tell you what to do, give you homework, talk to you. It talks a lot. And you may go to another therapist who talks not so much, very little. Who might say almost nothing, maybe about halfway through, the therapist might say something and then not say anything pretty much at all after that. If you've had a bad experience in therapy, then the only thing I can recommend is to try again with a different therapist. As I may have mentioned before, one of the most important healing aspects of therapy is when you are with a therapist who you and that person click, and the way that person works clicks with you. It works with your personality, and the two of you can work together. So if it doesn't, feel right, then maybe the therapist is not right for you. Do I wish that you would get the exact same therapy no matter who you went to? Sure. It's not where it's at right now. But again, don't throw the field out the window because it's not as hard as science in some areas as one might want it to be, as, let's say, physics or astronomy. Although I guess in astronomy it's dark matter. There are some aspects of astronomy, but I don't know enough about it, so I won't go into it. I'll just say what I just said there about not throwing the baby out with the bathwater and give therapy a second chance. And remember that there are many areas in psychology that are very concrete and that are highly replicable. Replicable? Right. Okay. So that's my take on the whole, it's really a science thing, very scientific. You will learn a lot if you were to study psychology, a lot of statistics, as I mentioned, a lot of biology and anatomy. Some of the statistics used in psychology are highly sophisticated. You would be shocked. When graduate school, there were psychologists who really were more statisticians than they were in any way a typical psychologist as we have stereotyped them. They're very interested in people, but more in like how they can use statistics to predict people's behavior and feelings. So it can be very, very much a hard science. All right, next one. How we are portrayed on TV and in the movies. This one really, I think this has a very significant effect on how people perceive the field of psychology. First and foremost, of course, psychology is always portrayed from the perspective of a psychotherapist. You never see a psychologist like the ones I just spoke of who use statistics to predict human behavior. You rarely would you see a psychology professor, an industrial psychologist, a cognitive psychologist. All the different areas in psychology are rarely represented, and all that people really see is a representation of psychotherapy. And it's always blown out of blown out of, what is it blown out of? Oh, I forget that expression now. It's just not the way it really is. Like most things in life, psychotherapy is actually pretty boring. Yeah, most of it is pretty darn boring. But movies, like everything else they do, they pull out what might be particularly interesting, or might use the word salacious. Therapists in the movies and on TV are always breaking the boundaries, which we talked about early episode, how important psychologists consider, the ethical principles by which the overwhelming majority abide by. You hear about, therapists having sex with their patients. I would guess, I don't have any data in front of me, that is as rare as teachers having sex with their students. But you hear about it, and, it has to do with sex, and so it has to be the leading story on the news. Rarely happens. Therapists who see their patients outside of therapy, who maybe come to their homes, or, this is all very unusual and gives people a view of psychology which is really, really unfortunate. A couple of specific examples. A movie that came out quite a while ago, it's an excellent movie called The Natural, a baseball movie. Highly recommend it. It's really quite a good movie. Our hero, Robert Redford, and so he's asked to attend this session with all of the rest of the players. The players are doing very poorly. They're losing. And so they have the psychiatrist, and people mix those two up, so what the heck, psychology with psychiatry. But the psychiatrist, of course, is this very nerdy-looking little guy, not nearly as handsome as our hero. And, me and a friend always laughed at this because this character says this over and over again. In his nerdy little voice, he says, "Losing is a disease." And then he goes on, and it's silly, it's kind of funny, but it's certainly not a very good portrayal. It makes the psychiatrist look like a total loser. And Robert Redford is just rolling his eyes, as we are, at this character here. That is one way where we are portrayed, that what the psychiatrist has to say is naive, that it's stupid, that it has nothing to do with with baseball or with what our hero is struggling with. Another famous character that's shoot over to TV would be Frasier. Right? That's a TV show that went on for quite a while and went off the air maybe 5 years ago now. Not a bad show, actually. I used to watch it. Kind of funny, well written, well acted. But it's a typical portrayal of, again, I think he's a psychiatrist, in which the advice that he gives is very little more than common sense, right? Which is another sort of thing that people might think that most of, the psychologists, it's all common sense. So he gives out this common sense advice to people, and that's the other thing I don't like, is that the patients are often also stereotyped in a very negative way, as if they themselves are losers. So you've got, it's sort of like the therapist's a loser and the patients are losers. And in Frasier's case, his whole life is a mess. He can't hold down a relationship. For some reason, we see that again and again, that when we see the lives of psychotherapists, they're usually a mess. I'll go to another movie, Freaky Friday. Not a bad movie, but so bad in the way that it portrays the lead character. She's a psychologist, Jamie Lee Curtis. So many things. I've seen this movie a few times because my kids really like it. It's got Lindsay Lohan in it, one of her early movies. But what do we learn about this psychologist in this movie? She makes $150 an hour. So this would easily make you pretty upset, right? If you already think that psychologists dole out common sense and they make $150 for even 50 minutes of an hour, why wouldn't you dislike psychology? And you just think, it's silly, it's stupid, it's not really a science, and they make so much money. Well, the truth is that I suppose there are therapists in major cities who make money like that. I would doubt that they dole out the kind of advice that we see in this movie. Again, it's so simplified. In fact, Jamie Lee Curtis, switches bodies with Lindsay Lohan, and so Lindsay Lohan has to go in and pretend to be a therapist. And so the only advice that Jamie Lee Curtis gives her is to say this, quote, just say, how do you feel about that? I referred to this earlier in terms of Carl Rogers. And that's it. That's all you really have to do, and you get paid $150 an hour. It's so ridiculous. And again, the patients are portrayed as such losers. And this is really, the movie makes me so mad when I watch it. It's really such a bad portrayal of psychology. Much before that, Bob Newhart, he had his own show. He was a psychologist, not nearly as bad as this Freaky Friday movie. He was sort of an ordinary guy, gave out ordinary advice, and his own life was, at least in this case, pretty ordinary. So I didn't find any offense, in Bob Newhart as much as in some of the other movies. I was watching recently a TV show called Awake, and I thought it was pretty interesting. And the portrayal of psychotherapy there was somewhat realistic. Nothing unusual happened there. It was sort of interesting to watch. So I don't know if you saw that, but... Well, anyway, okay. So let me... those are the main points I wanted to hit. A couple of things that I want to say. A couple of other maybe stray reasons why we don't like psychology. One is... I would say anti-intellectualism. There's a certain distrust of intellectuals. And, when you get a PhD, you're seen by some as not being down to earth. I remember someone, I think it was Natalie Nahai in an episode. I interviewed her a few episodes back, and we were commenting on that the bad guy usually has a British accent. And I think that's true. And the bad guy in the movies is typically the smart guy, right? Our hero is handsome, of course, very attractive, but often very down to earth. And the bad guy is usually smart. So I think there's a piece of that in our distrust, our fear of psychologists. I think that there's also an incorrect impression that psychologists have it all figured out, that their own lives are perfect. And I have to admit, when I was thinking about going into the field, I thought, well, why not become a psychologist? Because, they study the mind, and they must have really great lives, and they must not be troubled by anything. And that's not true. It is hard for me or anyone else who studies psychology to know what we would have been like if we had not studied it. No one escapes the pains of life. Hopefully, if you study the mind, if you study yourself, you don't have to get a PhD in psychology. If you take some time to learn about yourself, then hopefully you avoid some of the deeper pains, some of the pains that can last longer than maybe they need to if you can be willing to explore them. There's no reason to feel like, well, there are people out there who have a perfect life. Nobody I know has one of those. So anti-intellectualism, a fear that, at least a perception that you guys are so perfect, which would make anyone feel upset. Other things that kind of annoy me would be motivational speakers. Because they borrow, at least the ones that I've seen, and I don't know them all. And if you are a motivational speaker or a life coach, my concern is that they borrow some of the good ideas in psychology, which is all right, but if it's packaged in a way to suggest that you can change your life radically or quickly, I mentioned this before, we talked about positive thinking in the previous episode, then I think you're doing a disservice to your listeners. Change is hard. Change takes time. When I, see people on TV talking up, change the way you think, I don't know. I think that's also reflects poorly on the field. So there you go. Here's my wrap-up of the reasons why, most of them anyway, and again, thanks to Kevin, David, Esther, Brian, Shane, people who contributed to the conversation on the Psych Files Facebook group. Here they are again, the self-esteem movement. Okay, I know that you think we're behind that, but not totally. I'm not going to take total fault on that one. Change your thoughts and you change your life. I don't know psychologists would think that it's that easy. Well, let's say the overwhelming majority. The concern that psychology isn't a science, and once again, I'll remind you that other sciences go back and forth on things. The mind is complex, and it's just not that easy to zone in on the one reason why something occurs. The other reasons, the poor portrayal of psychology in the media. Okay, those are the main ones. And do feel free to stop by the website and tell me, you tried to defend psychology by saying this, but I still think you're wrong. And what the heck, I can bring it up on a future episode. I did want to thank the reviewers on iTunes who've left some wonderful reviews of the podcast. And I'll just, here's a few of the more recent ones. One of them is, if you recognize yourself, Brickard95, Nikki Mills, Kyle, here's a tough one, Anidius 2012, and Shane. Thank you so much for your reviews. If you have a chance, you're in iTunes. The podcast is there always in the top 10 in the higher education area, so I'm very proud of that. So if you get a chance to drop a review, that'd be great. And do check out the apps, Psych Explorer, Psych Test Hero. I work hard on them, been working on them today, as a matter of fact, and try to keep them up to date with the latest stuff. So they are also what psychology is really all about. Okay, there you go. Have a good week, and I will see you next time on the Psych Files. Take care.